Our next speaker is Dan Olds, someone else who I've had the pleasure of working with. He began his high-tech career with vendors, with Cray and Sun Microsystems and IBM, before he founded his consulting group, Gabriel Consulting Group, in 2002. And he was one of the first technologists to study total cost of ownership, server consolidation, and virtualization for the IT industry. He began writing about the impact of enterprise analytics even before it had been recognized in the industry press and before they gave it the name Big Data. Big Dan writes the HPC opinion blog, which is found on the Register, and he can be heard on Radio Free HPC. He's the click and clack, really, for HPC, the Oregon channel with Rich Bruckner. And he's frequently quoted in industry and business publications, including the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg News, Computer World, eWeek, and several others.
Okay, I'll cover the rest of it.
Okay. MBA out of the University of Chicago.
Okay, first of all, when Shaheen called me up to do this and said, we want you are the guy to talk about failure. And I'm thinking, why the hell am I the guy to talk about failure, Shaheen? So, deeply offensive. That's okay. That's okay, I'm here anyway. So I'm more than a little offended. I think Steve just went over all this kind of stuff, did a lot of product marketing, managing strategy, stuff like that, various vendors. Now, let's go ahead and talk about my first failure. One of the things we talked about was I was going to take 3 companies that failed and sort of dissect them and all that. I didn't do that, which is a failure since that's what you've seen in your overview. Reason why is that when I started diving into the companies that we were talking about, there's a lot of idiosyncratic reasons that they failed. So instead of that, which was Shaheen's approach, I decided I was going to use my approach, which I'm going to look at failure in 2 aspects, macro version and a micro version. Okay? So take that, Shaheen. Next time you get another guy to talk about failure. A couple of areas in computing we're going to talk about, and I sort of assigned these to. Go ahead.
You'll be our case study.
This presentation could be your case study. I want to go ahead and tell you what the SSID is for the wireless again. Paleozoic era of computing, that's what I'm calling the mainframe era. And it was amazing back then. People pretty much supported themselves, or in terms of programming and things like that. And at one point, IBM was so big they accounted for 90% of every dollar spent on computing, which is a lot, right? Did not leave much for anybody else. It was brought to an end by what I'm calling the Mesozoic, thank you, Shaheen, era of computing. What happened there is something, and I'm using this to get a point across as to how things change. What happened? Unix systems came along, for those of you that are deep in the system world. What they essentially were is Unix was the Linux of back then. That supposedly it was one operating system, ran all this different hardware. The hardware, hell of a lot cheaper. The hardware was really cheap. You could make your own programs. Instead, you had the ISV community growing up. It was the roots, the beginnings of Oracle, companies like that. It was a very cool thing. Started to eat the mainframe lunch and eventually killed it off. Not that mainframes are dead. People still buy them. People still use them. But in terms of growth, that growth rate, new name customers, maybe a couple a year, not very many. This was a big market. I mean, this took over as the major market play, the major servers sold out there, both in terms of volume and units, both in enterprise and HPC, the supercomputing markets. Unix owned the world, and there were lots of companies making them. There were, at one point, I think we sat down and counted 20 different Unix operating systems, all with little bit slightly different hardware, different software. There were different chips out there, MIPS, Spark, Intel, all up and down. But the thing that helped them win, these were primitive devices compared to these. I mean, really primitive. I mean, they would maybe work, they would maybe not work, right? The reliability wasn't great. It was a brave new world in terms of trying to manage them, in terms of trying to program them, but they were less expensive and they had power. That was the thing. And they did some things that you really couldn't do up here. They were much more open. You could get the same software package on numbers of systems. The thing that essentially killed them was the dot-com extinction event. So, Unix systems destroyed by a combination of what? Inexpensive x86 hardware, which is what a lot of us have in front of us right now, except for those of you on tablets. x86, Intel chips, AMD chips, very inexpensive, but to drive this home yet again, they were much more primitive. Those early x86 systems were horrible. The operating systems, Windows, you had this new thing called Linux, which you kind of had to invent yourself. It was open source, no one knew what the hell that was. Am I going to get supported? Is it buggy? Is it got all sorts of security holes? All of these questions. But it was less expensive, it was more primitive, it worked. It was good enough. And it just went to town after that. x86 systems run, boy, pretty much everything in the world. From the high-end HPC supercomputers are x86 based. Many enterprise systems are x86 based. But they took over the world essentially for the same reason that Unix took over the world from the dinosaurs of the mainframe era, which is how the mainframe era took over the world from the dinosaurs of abacuses and, you know, counting cards and things like that. Any questions so far? Making sense? Okay. During these transitions, and we're in one now, we're still in one, the transitions are coming closer and closer together, thousands, I mean literally thousands and probably thousands of companies died or were pillaged by raiders, their talent taken away, their IP taken away, ended up owned by someone else, or just dissolved, just turned into dust. Petrochemicals, maybe that's the best way to say it, they're oil. Others took advantage of the chaos, saw what was going on around them, started up new companies, different companies, and that's where we get today. Oracle is one of those companies. Linux, Red Hat, one of those companies in the last transition. Many others. We're seeing this particularly in terms of new services, things that you have in your phone, new apps. Probably a lot of the things that you're either doing or thinking about come into this are as a result of these transitions. What are the takeaways from this part of the presentation? Cheap and crappy wins, right? Cheap and perfect is pretty much impossible. Perfect and moderately expensive isn't new anymore because by the time you've perfected that, someone else has come out with something cheaper and crappier. But cheap and primitive, maybe that's the best way to do it, is a winner, okay? And customers will make allowances for that because it's less expensive. Doesn't mean you have to be the cheapest thing in the world. It just means you need to be less expensive than whatever is the mainframe in your product world, okay? I'm not talking about a race to the bottom in pricing. It's not going to, the race does not go to the absolutely lowest price of something. Otherwise, we'd all be driving some sort of flavor of Kia, right? But we don't. We all drive different kinds of cars for different kinds of reasons. But when you're coming into a new market, being the less expensive and the more primitive version, that's the position I'd want. Same thing has happened as I just said, both in software, business to business, business to consumer, and in services, apps, that sort of thing. Today we're seeing the disruptors on a daily basis. You're starting to track the new apps that are coming out. I mean, the easy ones, Airbnb, Uber, things like that disrupt huge models, taxis, hotels, things like that. Another thing is that if these companies had been more willing to eat their children, they might still be around. And some of them, like IBM, did do a little bit of child eating, but at least they were large enough and diversified enough to have survived. Are they going to make it past the next transition? That's an open question. Same with a company like Oracle that's dealing with this stuff now. Look at a company like SAS, which makes very high-end, very good data analytics. I mean, it's one of the best companies in the world to work for. They have on-site hotels and daycare, everything's free. It's just a lovely place, but it's very expensive software. And the numbers of analytic packages you can get for very inexpensively or almost free are growing very quickly. So that's a company that's going to have to think their way through this. as people that are interested in startups or have startups, you want to look for the situations where these transitions are happening, right? Look for the big players that you can disrupt, that you can come in and carve out a little bit of their functionality, do a good job on the piece that you do, but do the whole thing more efficiently, less expensively than what they're doing. Okay, we've done the macro view. Now we're going to do the micro view of failure. Any questions on the macro view? Comments, complaints? Yes?
Yeah, so, I mean, for a company to eat its own children, which I think you mean cannibalize your revenue stream by just
Yeah.
like just saying, we're doing cloud now, we're no longer doing, Oracle,
Yes.
whatever.
Yes.
How do they do that?
How do you do
By
it
the way,
gracefully?
I'm glad they don't, because that's why we win, right? But
It is.
startups, but how, how do they do it without pissing off their shareholders effectively? I mean, that's.
That
what these
is a
people do.
conundrum. What you have to do is you have to start out with the products in parallel, the new and the old.
That costs money.
It does.
A lot.
It does, absolutely. That's why to cannibalize your own young, you either have to be very nimble and not give too much of a crap about what your shareholders and what some disgruntled customers think. Apple did this way back in the day when every time they came up with a new damn computer, none of the old software worked. None of the peripherals worked, that sort of
But
thing.
Apple was almost dead when they
Yes.
reinvented themselves. I would say, other than Microsoft, who seems to be doing it
Yeah,
today, I mean, who would you think? Who would
Adobe.
you say? Yeah.
Adobe did it. In fact, I don't know if anybody knows this, but I think it's the best story in moving to a different business model. Adobe makes Photoshop, Premiere, Adobe Acrobat, of course, but a whole bunch of media creation, content creation type tools. Very expensive. I've been doing some video stuff at student cluster competitions for about 4 or 5 years now, and realized, you know what, I need to get some real tools, because this crappy movie maker that came with the system isn't cutting it anymore. I need to be able to do real graphics, so I gotta take a look at Adobe. Take a look at Adobe, looking at adding it up what I needed, going, that's gonna be $2,700 for software. Boom. Damn, that's a big number, especially when I was doing it for essentially zero before. And so I'm backing away from Adobe and thinking, okay, I will just soldier on with what I have, and that sucks. And then, by the way, I'd pay the $2,700. A year from now or so, they would have an upgrade. Photoshop would get an upgrade. It's another $250. I didn't want to get on that train. But what Adobe came out with was something called the Creative Cloud. $49.99 a month, I get access to everything they do. Instantly updated on multiple systems. Not multiple systems at the same time, but on multiple systems. I've got one license for everything Adobe does for this laptop, for my server at home, my other system at home. That's making the transition. The thing that's interesting, I was in an IBM analyst event, and they brought in Adobe as a customer to talk about it. They did that revenue neutral. That's what shocked me. Their revenue neutral was changing from selling big chunks of software to subscriptions. Yes?
Yeah, just on the Adobe thing, another thing which is worth adding, I sort of participate on a photography forum, and a lot of people are upset about the idea of being.
Oh, they're
moved to a
really mad.
subscription
Some of them are
model.
really mad.
However, Adobe got it wrong to begin with. They got the pricing way too high. Even the professional people in the studios were saying it was too costly, and they took
For
several.
the standalone software packages.
Yeah, for the
Yes.
whole creative suite.
Yes.
But even with just Photoshop and Lightroom, they started off at about $50 a month for a general sort of non-professional photographer. And when they finally brought it down to like $10 a month, people went to it. And it's a very good deal, and it's still hard to
Yeah.
convince them. But they took 3 or 4 attempts to get it to the level where it took off.
They did. And I bought the full meal deal at $49.99 a month, so I wasn't looking at the package things. But it's a brilliant way to do it. They get this monthly revenue stream rather than a very chunky revenue stream whenever they brought out new versions. That's kind of the way you do it if you can. You have a product that lends itself to that.
Well, the other little thing is that now they're able to drop some of the older versions, and therefore
Yeah.
the support costs are much lower as well. So it really makes sense.
And everybody's updated at the same time. So end of commercial for Adobe, but that's a great example, I think, of a company that's made a move in that case. And even as brilliant as I think that move was carried out, there are a lot of people that are really pissed off. The people that bought Adobe, they would buy Photoshop, whatever, and hold it for 3 years and not ever have to want to spend an extra penny on it. Hey, you guys are screwing me over. Adobe's like, sorry.
So you could probably count on 1, 2 fingers how many companies do this successfully. So as a
Yes.
startup,
Yes.
you can attack with a little bit, not so much fear, because it's just so difficult to do that for an incumbent.
Yes. It will take a long time and it will be hard. The bigger the company that the bigger the companies that you're fighting against, the harder it's gonna be for them to eat their young. Very few will do that. Microsoft's doing it, Adobe did it in terms of big companies. Smaller companies, it's actually a little bit easier to do that because you have you have much more greenfield out there, people that have never heard of you, as opposed to, a cash cow user base that is gonna revolt and come like, villagers with torches after you. Million ways to die in the jungle, here's some of them. Now we're talking about the micro risk, the micro chances of failure. Running out of runway. And I think everybody here knows what that means. You've got money, but you don't have all the money, and you have to pick and choose what you're gonna spend. You have to spend it carefully so that you don't run out of money before you've got enough revenue to lift you off the runway, right? And that's caused either spending money on the wrong things, too much money on the wrong things, or not enough fundraising. The other one, this one's near and dear to my heart, believing your own BS. And Rich Breckner talked in here earlier. He was talking about how to make better pitches. Remember? Does that ring bells? He had a red hat, about that high. Yeah. Rich and I are good buddies. We do a podcast together, and I wished I'd have had that one because he and I talk all the time about companies that we get pitched. I'm usually getting it from a PR person. I guess he is too, saying, "Oh yeah, these guys are great." And I look at their slides the night before and go, "My God, is there any way I can get out of this meeting tomorrow? Because this is just the same old crap. There's nothing new in this. They're doing the same. I saw that graphic on somebody else's slides. This is all cloudy, looking forward, all the buzzwords in there, and I just want to shoot myself in the head." But I end up doing it. I end up taking the call. And what changes is when I'm talking to the actual founders, talking to the people that have the passion for it. And I started asking them, "So why the hell would I do this rather than something else?" And they tell me, and it makes sense. And I go, "Why isn't it on slide number 1? Why is that buried either in your head or on slide 12? But I also get guys that go a bit too far, and this thing that we're doing is gonna have to be in every data center in the world. How come? Well, it's gonna have to be. I mean, this is an unlimited market. Well, no, it's not. It's real easy when you're in this startup phase, this push phase, to believe that what you've made is a panacea when it's really a point product. The thing that I think a lot of entrepreneurs might not understand, and this kind of goes back to the sales discussion we just had, you gain credibility from customers when you tell them what your product isn't perfect for. When you tell customers where not to use your product. When you tell them to use something else instead of you in a particular situation. We're great for A, B, and F, but for B, C, D, and M, do this. You gain credibility. You gain huge amounts of credibility when you do that. And that comes from not believing the stuff that your own BS that you're throwing out there. Real key here is to understanding your customers and what their use cases are, what their real use cases are. And this isn't the customers that are friendly and close to you. This is, third party, one step removed customers. This is having someone else look at it, doing a focus group, things that you can do, sort of guerrilla type market research to figure out who the best use case is. Giving your product to a company or someone who absolutely has no attachment to you, letting them try it. Steve, question?
5 minutes.
Okay. Let's speed up. Okay, here we go, a little more coffee. And we'll drive through the next 37 slides. We're just getting started here, just kind of skimming the surface. This is more really an introduction than anything else. One of the other big problems is startup team misalignment, and I can hear this on calls sometimes. When I'm talking to the founders of a company, and you're starting to ask a CEO type question, and you have 3 different voices kind of pipe up at the same time. When you're early on in the startup phase, well, hell, everybody's an equal part of the team. We're all just pushing in the same direction. There's no titles here. We're all pals and all that. Problem is, when you become a real business and you have real customers, You gotta have those things, you gotta have those divisions. Somebody's a CEO, somebody's a CTO, somebody's not either one of those, okay? You have to decide that stuff, you have to decide it soon, and you have to stick to it, okay? And actually, the last point there, when you think the tension is hidden, it's not, it shows. Low paranoia. People are just not paranoid enough. Damn it, I know I am. I'm plenty paranoid enough. But what you need to think of is what can put you out of business. You need to think about this a lot. Because the folks that you're competing with, the bigger companies, they're not thinking about it enough. That's why there's an opportunity for you folks. Or the people that should have thought of your idea but haven't, the people that are perfectly positioned to execute on your idea, they're not thinking about it enough either. You need to. And we talked quite a bit about slaughtering your cash cow before somebody else does. Somebody else will, right? You can't protect your winners forever. You've got to either build on those wins or you've got to go in a different direction, but nothing lasts forever. It's building a sandcastle on the sand. Looks really cool. It's great to have it, but when the waves start coming in, you can't stop the sea. You've either got to build a bigger castle, a better castle, or move on down the beach and build something else. Investor mismatches, don't take everybody's money. That's kind of scary. Somebody's offering us money, we should take it. No, you need to make sure that the venture capitalist, whoever you're getting the money from, their interests, their vision, their goals are aligned with your interests, vision, and goals. That can cause much, much heartache down the road if they're not. And sort of the basic blocking and tackling, manage things well, take things like accounting rules seriously, and laws, you know? Really, I hardly recommend it. It's just a good idea because the laws are the laws and they're there and there's penalties and things like that. I would go ahead and take those seriously. Also, on the other hand, remember you don't want to outsource anything. As Shaheen once said, and it was one of the things he said that's really stuck with me, is you never outsource something that is vital to your business, that's mission critical. Used to be back in the day, actually before I even started working, but every company had their own janitorial staff. They owned mops, they owned buckets, they owned all that kind of stuff. And then they realized, well, what the hell, why do we have all these janitors and things? We can have somebody come in once, twice a week and do it. You can outsource that. If something happens to the janitors, they go on strike, some sort of janitorial catastrophe happens and they suddenly don't exist anymore, well, gosh, you guys can empty your own waste baskets for a couple of weeks. It's something you can handle, you can do yourself. You don't outsource things that are more important than that because they don't have the skin in the game for your business that you have for your business. And that's, go ahead.
I would just say, but outsource everything else because if it's something that's taking your focus away from
Yes.
those critical things, it's just not worth doing.
In a lot of cases, don't hire an artist for the graphics work you need 2 or 3 times, you know? But be careful when you're talking about outsourcing. It's one of the things that I'm a little bit of a cloud heretic because I would be highly concerned at outsourcing something that's very vital to my business to, say, a cloud, when the only skin in the game they have is that if there's a failure that could put me out of business, they'll cheerfully refund my money for that month and give me an abject apology. But any sort of risk in the game beyond that, they won't sign up for that.
Well, we will, AWS won't. Their
Yes.
SLA basically says best effort.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, best efforts. Sorry, we did do our best though. Yeah, and we'll send you a letter. Let's see. No, you can't eliminate every risk. You can only mitigate them. And that's it. Questions, comments, complaints, input, anything. Yeah, Mike in the back. Yeah, you're standing up. That's enough. That's enough to call on you. And you right next to him? You're standing up too, so you must have something?
I completely agree with what you said about being in line with.
That's good. You could have stopped it and completely agreed. But no, what part? Go ahead.
I want to complain about the buzzword compliance. There's another talk coming up with a company with cloud in the name, and it was important to use that buzzword.
Some people
Nothing
get.
to do with HPC.
Some people are so sensitive that it almost makes you wonder why. Shaheen in the back.
Favorite failure story? Favorite crash and burn company?
Personal or?
Oh no, just the
crossing the street?
I kind of thought Gateway was kind of cool how they went out. Wasn't that on just a huge wave of partying and things? At least from an insider I know in Gateway. Yeah, Gateway, the PC guys. Just a massive amount of partying and things that you never thought you could even do in North Dakota that are legal in most of the counties in North Dakota. But yeah, that was quite the ride. That was kind of like that Wall Street movie that just came out with Leonardo DiCaprio. I guess it was pretty close to that, but in sort of a lame PC sort of way.
With cowhide.
With cowhide, yes. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dan.
See you later.